Welcome to part 4 of getting started with SPSS syntax. Now in this section, we're going to be looking at some useful examples of syntax. And you should remember that you can always create syntax simply by clicking the paste button in an SPSS dialog. That's a really simple way to create a syntax job. It's also a great way to learn how the syntax is structured in a given procedure. And it's a good way to get started if you want to edit the syntax or maybe add a subcommand within a particular procedure. However, in the next few examples, we're going to delve into aspects of syntax that illustrate how different procedures work or reveal functions that perhaps aren't obvious to the casual user. And to begin with, we're going to be looking at opening data in IBM SPSS statistics. To open an SPSS data file, that's a SAV or save file, then use the get command, or more specifically in this case, the get file command. And you can see it's quite a simple command. It's just get file equals, and then you have the path where the file resides with the file name, enclosed in quotes with a full stop at the end. So in this case, this command here would simply read the file employee.sav from the C temp directory. Let's just see how that's done. Let's skip here. So here we have the same command, get file, C temp employee.sav, and we execute that. Go to the data, and there it is. It's been read in. You can see it's called employee.sav. It's a native SPSS file. Something that's useful to know about is that there are some interesting little subcommands you can have on this. If I put a /, of course, you can see you have something like drop. Drop allows you to drop a bunch of variables if you think they're irrelevant or not. You're not going to use them in your analysis. Or keep does the opposite, which is if you wanted to keep just a minority of the variables and drop everything else, you could use /keep. Or you can use, in this case, /rename if you wanted to rename one of the fields. One of the fields we saw earlier on was called jobcat. So when we're reading it in, we could rename that to job role. And then just execute the procedure again. Go back to the data. You can see it's been reread again. There's only one file here. And that jobcat has now been named job role. So quite a useful little subcommand there on the get file procedure. If, however, you need to read a non-SPSS file, such as an Excel file or CSV file, then you can use the get data command. And that's specifically for that purpose. In fact, if you look at the structure of it, it includes a little subcommand called /type, which allows you to specify the type of file that you're trying to import. So if you're trying to import something like a Excel workbook, it would be get data /type equals XLSX, and then /file with, once again, the address of the file location with the file name, enclosed in quotes and the full stop at the end. Let's have a quick look at how that works. We'll just jump back out here. You can see I've got an example here already commented out. So if I just remove that asterisk, we're going to read the file employee.xlsx, hit execute on that. It's actually importing it at the moment. It's a non-SPSS file. We go back to the window now, it's read it in, and you can see it's just come in as a raw file. Currently we have only one file open at a time switched on, so it's replaced the previous file. But that's how you would use the get data command to import a non-SPSS file type. And lastly, while we're on this topic, just a useful procedure to know about is that you can easily change the default directory. This is useful when you have to read files on a regular basis from specific subfolders. So if you've got like quite a long file address, like here we have C users, CW Jones documents, monthly reports, January.sav. Instead of typing all that out, you could use the CD command to define the default folder. So then if you simply run the procedure get file equals January.sav, it will assume it's in that default folder. Let's see that working. So we just click back out to our little example here. Here we have us reading a file in C temp documents, monthly reports, July employee.sav. Let's run that. Does it read the file? Let's see, there's employee.sav, it's been read in. Okay, let's go back here. Let's define a default directory and hit run. It's actually closed down employee.sav, so it's not cheating. We'll leave the old untitled Excel file open, and then we can run simply get file employee.sav having defined our default directory. And there is employee.sav as it's been read in. If you often read non-SPSS file types, such as Excel or CSV text files, you probably find that you need to do things like applying variable labels and value labels to the data once it's imported, because it's just imported as raw data. Excel doesn't have the concept of what we call dictionary information or labels that you have in native SPSS files. Now, the other issue is that when you're doing that inside SPSS and you're using the variable view window, you're typing in value labels and variable labels and assigning missing values, you may notice that there's no paste button there. It is getting recorded and there is syntax for it, but for some reason there isn't a paste button to show what you're doing. So knowing the syntax for creating things like variable labels and value labels is quite useful. If you look at the variable label syntax for say attaching a variable label to a variable like jobcat that we've seen already, we can see that the syntax for it's pretty simple. It's simply the command variable labels followed by the name of the field followed by the variable label itself. This is the variable label being the thing that you want to appear above a bar chart or above some sort of statistical output rather than the variable name. The variable label itself is then simply added on to the end of that in single quotes. So let's just have a quick look at how we would do that. Here I'm going to read in my file. Once again, here's my employee XLS file. I'm reading that in. You can see that once it reads that in, it comes in as raw data. There's raw data. You can see that the field jobcat here doesn't have a variable label. Click on it. There's no variable label attached to it. So let's just run the syntax associated with that. Variable labels, jobcat, employee, job category, quote unquote, with a full stop at the end. Execute that. Come back to it. And here we can see that the label has been attached to that particular field. So that's pretty useful to know about. Now, the other type of labels are, of course, value labels. And they work in a very similar way to variable labels in that when you execute the value labels command, it will overwrite any existing labels which are already there, which can cause issues, of course, if you've already got a lot of labels defined against a particular variable. Before we get into how to resolve that, let's just look at the value labels command structure. So it's basically the command value labels followed by the variable name and then the value and the label in order. So we have it's saying the value of 1 will be have attached to that a label clerical, value of 2 will have the label value label custodial attached to that, and of course a value of 3 will have the value label manager attached to that. It doesn't mean that these are the only values you can have, of course. You can have other values in there, they just wouldn't be labeled. But if it sees a 1, a 2 or a 3, it will attach these value labels to it. So let's jump out to the SPSS syntax to have a look at how we do that. Before we do so, just worth pointing out here that the variable jobcat which it's read in a scale field. It doesn't know what it is. So there is actually a little procedure here called variable level, which allows you to reset that or to change that to say nominal or ordinal. So I can run that. So here I'm going variable level jobcat nominal. Execute on that. Come back to it. You can see now it's been set as a nominal field. Let's look at the value labels command between that. There is the value labels command just beneath that. Value labels jobcat 1, 2, and 3. Run that. Execute that procedure there, and we can see, double clicking on it, that the value labels have been attached to that. Okay, that's kind of useful. What happens if we wanted to attach another value label to it? Let's say we had a new value that came along, or a new data set of data rows were added in there containing rows where people were neither managers or clerical workers or custodial workers. How might we add a value label to that? Well, we can see that there is an additional value labels command called the add value labels command, which is useful when you want to create a new category. So I could create another value label here using the add value labels command for a hypothetical category called Vice President or VP. So if I just jump back to SPSS and we'll run that, add value labels JobCat VP, JobCat for VP, sorry, run that. It's come back. It doesn't look like anybody is in there for category 4, but if I just change that value there to 4, let's see, that's popped up the VP. So we can see that that value label has been added and we haven't overwritten the existing value labels in there. So it's quite a useful little alternative command to know about. So on the theme of useful syntax procedures, let's turn our attention now to recoding data. A lot of people find that using the dialog boxes for the recode commands is more complex than using the syntax. I actually prefer to use the syntax than using the dialogues for recode into same variables or recode in different variables. They get quite confused over those dialog boxes. And I have to agree that the syntax does look somewhat simpler and more intuitive. Here we're using recode to create a new variable called JobCat2. And you can see that the command has a certain structure. There's recode JobCat into JobCat2, and here are the recoding. 1 through 2 becomes 1, 3 through the highest value becomes 2. So that's 1, we specify the name of the variable we want to recode. 2, we state that categories 1 and 2 will be recorded recoded into a value of 1. We state that a value of 3 or higher will be recoded into a value of 2. And we specify the name of the new variable that the recode will create. Let's have a look at that. So back in SPSS, we can just uncomment our recode statement, same recode statement that we saw earlier. There's also a little execute command. That's sort of a convention with transformation procedures in SPSS like compute and recode. It just allows it to populate the newly created column with the actual data values. So let's just run both of those procedures there, just the recode and the execute, run that. And here's our new field JobCat. Here you can see that there's a missing value down here, so that doesn't fall into either the category 1 or category 2. And of course they don't have any value labels or variable labels attached to them, so if we just go back to the syntax, we can run our variable label statement here. So we're just saying that JobCat2 has the variable label management status, and that the two values, value of 1 and value of 2, simply refer to those who are non-managers and those who are managers. So I'll run that as well. And there we have our fully populated variable. Right click on it and just do a quick descriptive statistics on it. And there's our variable, 82% non-managers, 17.8% managers, and one system missing case in there.